Welcome to our Store University seminar, How to Get Insanely Rich, Chapter 2. I'm Chris Folks, CEO of Store Capital. I initially created a 10-lesson course series entitled Store University to help business leaders understand the essentials of business value creation. In this new seminar series, we'll help you understand how to materially impact your own personal wealth creation, or in other words, how to get insanely rich. In our first chapter, we discussed the 4 basic ways to get and retire rich. The first of these is to inherit a lot of money, but that's not you. The second is to do your best to save $1,000 a month for 40 years. It works, but it requires incredible discipline on potentially limited income. The third is to work to get a job that puts you as close to the top 1% of Americans as you can, which will enable you to save and invest more than $1,000 a month. And then there's the fourth way, which is to have equity in a business. This will give you the best shot to get insanely rich. And you can see this for yourself just by looking at the Forbes 400 list of wealthiest Americans. In this list, virtually every self-made member made their wealth by owning, starting, and investing in a business. Obviously, the businesses that catapulted these individuals onto this list are amazing businesses, amongst the best in the world. But the good news is that you don't have to be one of these 400 people. The odds against that are really long anyway. Think about this instead. In 2010, there were almost 28 million small businesses in the United States, and there were about 18,500 companies that employed 500 people or more. Now, the company I lead has just around 90 employees, and we're still large enough to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. At the end of 2017, there were about 3,600 such public American companies listed on a stock exchange, meaning that most of corporate America is privately held. So only the smallest handful ever get to the Forbes 400, but that does not mean there aren't many other highly successful companies that can create insane amounts of wealth. At the end of 2017, there were almost 11 million millionaires in the United States. My guess is the richest among them got there by owning a business. Being a physician may be the most touted way of joining the 1% of highest income Americans, but owning all or part of a good business is the best way of having an opportunity to become insanely rich. It offers a great shot at well exceeding a retirement nest egg of $2.5 million, which is about what you would have if you had saved and invested $1,000 a month for 40 years. So, what is the secret to this? The secret is to create a business having investor returns that exceed expectations. But before we get there, it might help to have a primer on how to compute an investor return, which I will call a return on equity for now. Let's say you have a company that does $1.5 million a year in sales. But to get these sales, you first have to invest $1 million. That investment is in cash, and you have to tie it up in things like building and equipment. And maybe you don't get paid right away because your customers pay you a month or two after delivery, so you have to invest cash in production that's not paid right away, and that's called accounts receivable. And it's an investment every bit as much as equipment and buildings. And maybe you have to invest cash in production to have inventory on hand at all times, just waiting for an order. Inventory is another investment you have to make. Maybe you have to prepay your insurance for a full year before you even open the doors. Another investment. So you're getting the picture. Investments are what tie up your cash. But you may get a break. Some of your inventory suppliers may not need to be paid right away. Likewise, you may only need to pay your staff every other week, which gives you a break on cash compensation that you have to pay out. This means that your real company investment is equal to all the cash you have to lay out for buildings, equipment, inventory, receivables, prepaid costs, less any amounts that you don't have to pay for yet that are carried by the likes of your suppliers and staff. Or, if I had to redefine investment, I would say that it's any cash you have to lay out that needs to be financed through interest-charging creditor or equity investor money. So now we have your sales and we now have your investment. The next item we need to know is your operating profit margin. This is the profit that's available to you before you pay your investors and other people's money, or OPM as we like to refer to it. I use the term OPM because it's most descriptive. OPM can come from banks, leasing companies, and other sources looking for specific guaranteed payments in exchange for the financing they provide. Here, I will use the term earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, and rents, or EBITDAR. If you're wondering what depreciation and amortization are, these are simply accounting conventions that are designed to impose a cost to you for the wear and tear on any physical assets or intellectual property that you hold and paid for. But since these are just conventions designed to create an estimate and not real money, we can just ignore them for now. Because what I'm doing for you here is to describe investments in financial and not accounting terms. And there's one thing all entrepreneurs know: how much cash do they have tied up in their business? With that said, in this case, the EBITDAR margin is 20%, meaning that the company has 20% of sales that's available to pay for OPM, and then the rest goes to investors. 20% of $1.5 million in sales is $300,000. So now you have the first three variables that go into calculating investor returns: sales, investment, and operating profit margin. In our next lesson, we'll dive into the other three variables that comprise investor returns and then start to compute the wealth that you have created. Until then, I'm Chris Volk, thanking you for joining me on this value creation journey.